Hey everyone, I'm Charlie Shrem, and you're listening to Untold Stories. Today on the show, I had Jonathan Leong, the co-founder and CEO of BTSE. Actually, one of the coolest derivative exchanges that's launching some new products that I actually know. It's super cool. We had a great conversation, mostly about the world today, what Asia looks like, what the crypto world looks like, how it all works together. We talked about Jonathan's life, his background, and honestly, some really cool metrics and information that I didn't know. I asked him what he's excited about and what he's working on. And after doing the show today, I kind of want to invest in his next project. So enjoy the show, and I'll talk to you guys just right in a minute. Today on the show, I have Jonathan Leong, the co-founder and CEO of BTSE. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Charlie.
Derivatives really exploded in the past, 6 months to a year. It became such a big thing. Everyone's talking about it. Did you kind of foresee this? You bootstrapped and built this thing on your own. You built am I correct in the original code base, everything you've built from scratch to start? Did you think derivatives were going to be such a big deal in crypto, or were you just saying, I'm going to take a shot at it and see what happens?
Well, I mean, if you look at traditional markets, derivatives are always one of the main features that you got to have if you want to really trade any asset. And being able to have a derivatives market for Bitcoin is actually one of the first most important steps in globalization of Bitcoin.
I remember in 2012, I was trying to launch a Bitcoin debit card, and a lot of people were saying it's a bad idea because we don't want to create more ways for people to sell Bitcoin. It was like a short-minded argument, but it was a short-lived argument. But I remember I got a lot of flack from people, a lot. And at the time, no one had even conceptualized building a debit card for, to buy and sell Bitcoin. There weren't even ways to buy and sell Bitcoin. Hell, there weren't very many people who wanted to buy and sell Bitcoin. So why would I create a debit card? But it was more for the feelings, for the same reasons that you've launched yours now and that you've wanted to launch yours now. But a lot of people came at me and said, we don't want to allow people to sell Bitcoin. It's not a good idea. Let's have only people buy. And I said, if you don't have a free market where people are buying and selling, freely whenever they want to, you're not going to have an accurate price. And then what we're doing is no better than a Ponzi scheme.
Well, I would agree, right? I mean, but also back then, 2012 and where we are now, the space has really evolved it's really evolved. And, these days you can fund your debit card with not just Bitcoin, but I do agree with the point that, Bitcoin has to be widely adopted and widespread enough. And in order for that to happen and have that widespread adoption, you need the right tools for that, right? And having an ability to spend is also as important as having the ability to make Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And a lot of people would say that holders are not using Bitcoin, but I would argue, in fact, that holders and spenders, you need to be able to spend and use Bitcoin. And we're talking about Bitcoin, but really, I talk about Bitcoin, but also crypto sometimes interchangeably when I talk about the market as a whole. Whenever I talk to Bitcoin Cash people, I change this to green, which I don't talk to Bitcoin Cash. I'm just joking. I have everyone on the show because I like to get the right. But I love this lamp. I bought this on Amazon. If I keep it flashing, my editors will get mad at me. I just keep it on one color. It makes it much easier. But tell me about you. Where did you grow up? Where did you get started? And did you do anything when you were in university or whatever? Did you work? How did you get your first life experiences?
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Singapore. An engineer by background. I started coding when I was 15. Fell in love with it. At 21, I built my first trading platform. Dropped out in university at the age of 22, and since then I've never really looked back. That was when I started my career in building high performance transaction platforms. And I've been doing that for about 15 years now. About 6 years ago, I started and got into venture building. I decided that it's not just important knowing how to build up a code base and build up a platform, but actually understanding the things that drive a business around it. And since then, we've been looking at and invested in multiple projects that we always identify got good potential and are really complementary to our ecosystem. So, yeah, and BTSE happens to be one of my latest ventures that I find actually one of the most interesting projects that I've taken on.
So you're a serial entrepreneur, different than a lot of people in the space who this is kind of like their first, myself included, was my first foray into business. So a lot of people join the space and they start a company. They've never started a company before. You've started different companies and projects. What was the first project that you started at, when you had left university? What was that made you, stop going to class basically?
Well, my partner came to me and he had this platform that he needed built. And it was focused more towards FX trading. And what they required then was a simple order placement engine. But as it evolved, what it evolved into was high frequency trading. So we spent a good portion of that time realizing what was lacking that most people didn't have access to. And I felt that was a very interesting concept, right? And worst case scenario, if it didn't work out at the age of 22, I could always go back to school. But as we built on it, we learned a lot of life experiences and really evolved the way we saw things.
I just had a great conversation with someone in the elevator when I was getting this coffee about high frequency trading. And I want to ask you to teach me a little bit. So, do you remember the stock Hertz exploded last week? It went up 600%, and it was mostly it was like Hertz declared bankruptcy, car rental company in the U.S. for those who don't know. And what had happened was millennials or younger people have been buying stocks on Robinhood and the like for many years, but until Hertz is one of those companies that everyone's used, and that was the company that shot up. And when the stock market, when they declared bankruptcy, they said that 45% of all the trading that day was done by Robinhood users. So 45% of the purchasing or the trading on the stock market in the US that day were these retail traders on Robinhood. How is that affected? Because Robinhood is really, Robinhood is not retail buying these stocks. They're actually just using high frequency trading bots. They're using prop desks to buy all their stocks. How does that end up working? Aren't high frequency traders and bots supposed to follow the market and create and close the gaps and the inefficiencies of the market and find arbitrage opportunities? What does it look like to you when a stock market is now traded 50% by one specific type of entity? I guess, do you kind of see where I'm going with this question?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been a long time subject,
Crazy.
right? That high frequency trading brings an unfair advantage and takes advantage of retail traders, right?
Yeah,
and spending billions of dollars to minimize latency is something that's not new for Wall Street, and that's just how it is, right? I mean, there have been times where people have tried to address this, but unfortunately, it hasn't really been addressed. If you talk about market efficiency, I mean, that's how all these firms, make their money.
Yeah,
that's the reality of it, and that's where they're going to get their flows from, right? You get good, healthy flows from retail. That's the reality.
You get good, healthy flows from retail. In fact, it's kind of crazy that it's and no one's really talking about it. And I think because so if you notice, and I try to tell people, it's you have to understand, big business owns the media, government controls the media or whatever, whatever country you're in, that's a relative scale. But let's just take that blanket statement for a second. They're not going to allow information that makes you more money and makes them less to be talked about in the mainstream media. So, for example, the fact that retail traders and retail buyers and just normal people like you and I grab my phone, I call kind of cell phone traders, people that do things on their phones, buy stocks, buy Bitcoin on their phones. The mainstream media doesn't really want you to know that airlines right now instead of raising money from banks, United Airlines, is going to get a mortgage bank. But you know what the Middle Eastern airlines are doing and the Asian airlines are doing? They're actually going to people directly and selling miles with big bonuses for cash now to raise money. So you have the ability for billion-dollar airlines to raise money from people like you and I. That is an unbelievable thing here, because then you have all these middlemen, desks and traders and investment banks and the companies that you worked for and the Goldman Sachs, all those companies, the real money is made in between the lines. All those companies now, they're obsolete. Same thing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin and crypto takes away all these middlemen. You're going to see now, I think, you're going to see that completely take over. I get very excited about this.
Well, unfortunately, that's the way the world is, right? And that's how mainstream media works. That's the reality. But the one good thing that is that regardless of manipulation, is what Bitcoin brings to that table, right? As it continues to permeate society, you start to see that people are starting to believe in it, right? Believe in it or not, time will tell.
That's a good point.
And then with that 21 million supply and that continuous halving process that's always repeatedly ongoing, that really does paint a very different picture compared to your airline stocks and whatnot, right?
It does create a very different picture. And that's a very interesting point. Let me ask you a question. What do you think are the most important metrics for looking at, this is a hard question because I don't even know the answer, the global or the big picture 10-year, if we take Bitcoin or crypto and 90 years from now, we look at it as in 10-year periods, right? What kind of metrics can we look at that'll give us that big picture of how we're doing? Or let's just say we look at it as 5-year periods and now we're in year 11 or whatever. How do you think it's going to look the first 5 years, the second 5 years? What are metrics? Because I think you said one very good. You said belief. Belief is an unquantifiable metric that I think is so important for Bitcoin, because belief and the belief that we're a safe haven asset, the belief of all these, belief of security, the belief that it'll exist 100 years from now. You think what other type of metrics are there? I know I'm throwing a lot of shit at you today because you're very smart and I need to bounce off ideas off. My research, I'm this guy knows his shit. I'm gonna ask him some questions.
Sure. Well, it comes down to who remains world power, right? In my opinion, what is the world's reserve currency, and what is held, and what's backing that, right? Governments are still going to be, depending which government is in control at the end of the day, right? Handling that reserve currency. And as long as, let's say, the United States remains a leader, the dollar will always remain superior in that sense. Now, whether the dollar value remains, of course, comes to that form of belief, right? So, it's all interlinked, right? And at the end of the day, in my opinion, the whole game is rigged.
The whole game is rigged. And it's like living in the Matrix. If you know the whole game is rigged, can you now play within the game? You're in Singapore. You grew up in Singapore. Singapore follows a very, very wildly different capitalism model. What do you think of it? Because here on one end, you have an amazing free market, and arguably now you would say that Singapore has become or is becoming the financial capital of the world, especially after Hong Kong, and especially after how things have played out. If anything, people have woken up to the fact that there are other places. But Singapore is interesting because while you have very, very free market, the government itself is extremely controlling. But it's also, you're very clean. And I guess my question is, I was always raised to believe that you need to have, and I'd like for you to open up my ears to this and teach me, because I was always raised to believe that capitalism is the best form of economic, the best economy, and small government And when you have the government not involved in anything, you'll have a much more free economy, much more free world, much more free market, and everything's good. But in Singapore, it's different. It's the opposite. You have an extremely free economy, but an extremely, extremely like centralized and controlling government. How does that? But they're free, so they protect civil rights instead of saying, "Well, we're not gonna." We're basically Singapore was like, we're gonna legislate morality instead of letting the people and it's been kind of working. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's really, if you look below the layers, right? Capitalism is that it's important because it drives the economy. It's just in various forms, right? Having freedom of speech. Now, what value? So freedom of speech is also, it comes with various levels. And with that also comes various types of responsibilities and expectations of what that brings about. So it's not to say that in Singapore, because of specific government policies, that means a certain, a sterile environment. Not necessarily, right? But it's how they find a way to harmonize, create harmony around massive different cultures, different types of people, all walks of life, right? With a form of tolerance that, you can still be able to say what you want to say, but, being politically correct can still be managed properly, in that sense. And that's a different way of doing business, I would say. It's just a different culture. Does it work better or not? No, it's hard to say.
I think for the purpose of this conversation, but for the purpose of the world, we should be allowed to experiment on different models and different types without coming after each other. And jurisdictional shopping, actually, I don't even know if I like that term, but so what I think, Jonathan, is going to happen now is you're going to see a huge geographical shift, but people are looking too small. They're looking, people from New York are going to move to Florida. I think that's going to be bigger than that. I think you're going to start to see countries like Singapore and others start to go and try to attract specific type of people to live there and be residents and work there. And you're going to see these countries start to offer more different types of benefits, but also like pros and cons. So you have a country like Singapore say, hey, look, this is our model. This is the way we work. Come and live here. And now I think it's important to investigate those different type of options and see like where the world is. And I think that's one of the things that's going to come out of COVID. Before COVID, did you travel a lot? Did you ever feel like borders were a real thing, or were you traveling all over and saying it doesn't really matter? It's just the language and the food is the only thing different.
No, I would travel every 2 weeks actually, and
there you go.
Exactly. So I've been all over the world, met all types of people from all walks of life. I've always found everyone to be very interesting and bring about very different perspectives of the world and the culture, right, that they come from. So I think it's important to, meet as many people as you can and hear all these various opinions, right? Yeah. And what matters at the end of the day is you sitting down and just reflecting, all right, what makes the most sense? What is it that makes me happy, actually?
Exactly. What makes me happy? That should be what everyone should be asking themselves. It's not about other people. You spend so much time pushing your opinion on everyone else. You forget what matters to you. What do you care about? What do you love? Why are you here in this earth? What are you doing here? You see too much of that. Okay, come on. This is so cool. This is the new Bitpay card that I have in my hand, and I'm so excited to be finally having the new one that just came out. Now, guys, I've been using the Bitpay card since 2016. Yeah, you heard that right. Way before I started Untold Stories, way before Bitpay became a sponsor of mine, I've been using this card, and it literally became a way for me to have a bank account for many, many years, as a lot of people in crypto need better banking. The Bitpay card is chock full of the coolest features. It's got contactless pay, better rates and limits, no fees to convert from Bitcoin right onto the card, added in chip security. I mean, it's sexy, it looks good, unlike other cards. It's so easy to get. Just download the Bitpay app on your phone, click the card icon, and you can do it right there. If you use the promo code CharlieJune20, your card is free. Remember, Charlie, June 20. It's in the show notes. You can get a free card. So literally, just from listening to my show today, and make sure you actually listen, you could get a free card just by entering that code. So download the BitPay app, get the coolest card on the market, the best card on the market. I've been using it for over 4 years now. I know there's so many cards out there, but the BitPay brand is the oldest and longest running Bitcoin company in the world. I mean, that's who issues this card. This is the card you want to have. Remember, Charlie, June 20. Download the BitPay app on iOS or Android to sign up for the new card. You're going to freaking love it. There's no question that crypto and gaming have gone hand in hand since the early days of Bitcoin when it first launched. And in fact, that's what really drove mass adoption. Companies like BitCasino, which is the first ever licensed Bitcoin casino, and brands like sportsbet.io. I mean, it's the reason people are using crypto and Bitcoin today. Fun, fast, and fair. When you're using blockchain-based gaming, make sure you require that they are fair, because there's no reason that they shouldn't be transparent, because everything can be seen on the blockchain. Coingaming is so cool. It's an ecosystem of brands, products, and people that are serious not just about shaking up the gaming industry, but also the crypto industry. These guys have been around since the early days of Bitcoin. The CEO of Coingaming used to actually mine for Bitcoin and use the Bitcoin miner to heat his home in Estonia. I mean, those go down to like negative 25 degrees. So if you're cool about driving crypto awareness together, if you got a question or you just want to connect with their team of like dreamers and doers, the whole community, make sure you check them out. Coingaming.io, play some of their games, sportsbet.io, or BitCasino. Fun, fast, and fair. I'm Charlie Shrem. I'll talk to you guys right in a minute. Want to change gears because the time is running away from us. Talk to me about BTSE. What makes BTSE different? I want to just say you guys are, I am an influencer for you guys. I do consulting. And so I want to just throw that out there to all the listeners that I do tweet about BTSE very frequently and talk about your OTC and debit card platform. But yeah, tell me about like what excites you and how you got started with that.
Sure. Okay. I mean, I started in this space pretty late, right? Started out on a pet project, a mining project in 2016. Then finally, I actually learned about the economics behind Bitcoin, and that got me intrigued and that got me started.
What are the economics behind Bitcoin? I don't think anyone knows.
It's very simple, right? It's a limited supply. It keeps decreasing as long as people believe in it. There's a value that people believe in it. That's where it just works, right?
Yep.
And you can't really change the code in it, right? Like if you watch that movie I, Robot back in the day, right? There are like 3 laws that are hard, that are encoded into its DNA. And you don't have a financial product or asset that has that, hard coded into it. So for me, those are the key metrics that would drive the economics of Bitcoin. So, I mean, naturally, of course, as prices appreciate, you start to take notice of more things. Yeah. And then you realize that, hey, the platforms out there back then, they were complex to use. They're not very reliable, right? Getting monies into Bitcoin was actually an uphill battle, right? Yeah. So that's where we decided that, if we're going to do something, we do it right. These days, everyone's just so used to ease of use, convenience. It's in your daily routine. We actually take all these things for granted. Something that we can pay for coffee just with a tap of my card, be able to wirelessly transfer monies. These are things we really take for granted, but they are run on legacy systems, legacy infrastructure, right? That's not interconnected properly, right? You're still remitting monies very inefficiently via the SWIFT network, right? And there's so much more efficient ways to do it, but that also takes, a global effort to make everything work, a new standard. So when we set up to build BTSE, it was not just to build an exchange. It was something that we believed that we could, with our prior experiences, build up institutional standards to make it possible that the cryptocurrency space can actually coexist with what we have in the financial space and actually help improve that a notch up, you see? So a result of that is we've got our exchange that offers spot and futures trading. We've got OTC. We've got a settlement layer. We've got asset conversions.
Why are you pricing? There's a relatively new thing. You're pricing gold futures in Bitcoin.
Because, see, I think that the greatest competitor to Bitcoin is gold, right?
Okay.
And for that belief, I'm actually curious to see how that plays out, right? I mean, you've got gold that has been that store of value, that recognized reserve asset, right? For thousands of years. And the biggest problem with that is gold has never been that liquid, right?
True story.
Right? So now if I digitize gold and I make it an ERC20 contract, the amount of accessibility that everyone has immediately without having to worry about handling, authenticity, borders, that changes it totally, right?
It does. And I want to tangent super quickly for a second and come back to this because do you think Ethereum as an exchange owner does Ethereum have enough critical mass or market share that really any other of these blockchains, as better as they are and as better as scaling and efficiencies as they are, blah blah blah, TRN20 contracts or whatever Tron calls their version of ERC20. Like, do you think at the end of the day, any of these will, because if you go, I mean, the amount of ETH trading pairs there are is just staggering. So I find it hard to see a competitor to Ethereum. And just full disclosure, I own a half an ETH right now. Like, that's where I am at. I do own a lot of Bitcoin. What?
That's fine.
I should own more Ethereum, but I've owned a lot over I actually use Ethereum more than I hold it. Interestingly enough, I hold and save Bitcoin, but I use Ethereum. Interestingly enough, but that's not on purpose. It's just the way the world, the way the world works.
Right. So when it comes
I don't want to spend Bitcoin. I don't mind spending Ethereum. Well, because Vitalik has been telling me that Ethereum is not money for years. I mean, I would sit and eat lobster with him on Monday nights and he'd be telling me that Ethereum is not money. So what am I supposed to do?
Well, I mean, and Ethereum as a protocol, it's just widely adopted at this stage, right?
Yeah.
But, there are many options out there for us as an exchange for inter-exchange settlement and what it serves. We do have our views on why we prefer, say, Blockstream Liquid. But adoption, of course, is another thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but, having things, what Ethereum is priced at and how it's being priced and why. It's just because right now there is widespread adoption, across all the exchanges.
That's what it comes out to.
Yeah, but come to our platform, have a look. We've got a multi-currency order book. You can price it in any type of asset. If you want to see Bitcoin priced or just say Ethereum priced in any kind of asset against Bitcoin, against Monero.
It took so long to do that.
Come again?
I'm surprised it took so long to do that. A lot of all the exchanges wouldn't put pairs until there was volume. And I said, but I just want to see what my token is worth relative to Ethereum or Bitcoin. I said, well, there's no Ethereum or Bitcoin pair for this. There's only USDT. I said, it doesn't make any sense. Why can't you just change the drop-down menu to show me the relative value and I can trade that way? Exactly. So thank you for doing that. But anyways, before the tangent, going back to what we were talking about, the global world and BTSE and everything, do you think it's a healthy, important in the market for super, super competition between all the exchanges and derivative exchanges and spot trading exchanges and everything like that? Or I don't even know if I like to use the word exchanges, but these places where buyers and sellers come together. Is competition important and good to a point where you guys can yell at each other online? Not that I see much of that anymore. Or is it someone said all the Bitcoin exchanges should form like a consortium. I'm like, that's the worst idea. But what do you think?
I think a variety is good, right? I mean, let's say you're looking for a life partner. It's like someone saying that, hey, you got to go with this person or that person, or you got to like this type of person, right? I think a good variety brings about good, healthy, what's the word for it? Just good, healthy if desire is a word for
Yeah.
it, but you know what I mean. So anyway, back to my point. Yeah, good variety, I think, is always good. Everyone brings different strengths, different products to the table, but that's where we believe we stand out, because we want to serve as that infrastructure layer of services where, you have a great idea. You don't want to spend too much hassle developing something. We'll provide you an API and you can actually build on top of that. So we actually provide you all these ease of services to serve your target clientele. We believe that this is important and not many people are doing it in this space. Everyone's just building a product which is always very focused and very specific to something. But if you're focused on the greater good of, do you actually look and remember the guys who built a great city, who laid out the best roads, who helped, build up all that infrastructure?
No, you're right. So on that infrastructure note, are we done building products and infrastructure that we need, and now we're building more things that we want? Or are there still infrastructure plays or things in our industry that are still so strongly needed that we're still building those too? Like when you built BTSE, you felt that the standards and efficiencies of Bitcoin trading weren't good enough to your standards. So you created this company. Are there other types of infrastructure and companies and products that we still need? Or do you look at our industry and say, this is lacking, we're missing this?
Yes, that's the whole point. That's why we're focused not on building up one vertical, but multiple verticals, right? Yeah. If you build any product, the first thing you go to is you go back to basics. You don't look at what's out there, what's already done as a reference point, right? As what your competitors are doing. But rather than creating a clone of it, you go look for your own blue ocean, right? And this is where you go to the drawing board and you decide and you figure out what is it that people actually need, right? Not just say, hey, I'm going to copy this because this one has volume and there's demand here. What types
of companies now or products should we be looking at? Like you're looking, I see a lot of still like infrastructure plays of exchanges. I see miners still launching more different types of mining chips and different mining rigs. Are you following the mining industry at all?
Just a bit, not too much.
Do you guys have a mining pool? Do you have a lot of miners and things like that?
We don't have a mining pool. I mean, I used to mine quite a bit as a side project with some friends, but that's the most that it got to. And we do have a mining play that we're interested to look at, and that's something that we are, down the road we will be looking at.
Tell me about your debit card. What makes it different?
Well, it's got quite a bit of cool features, I would say. We're able to offer it globally.
Okay, that's right there. That's like the best feature because most of them can't do that.
It supports a dozen of currencies that you can actually load directly into your card. So you can actually, all you have to do is fund your BTSE wallet, and that supports, I believe, 10 fiat currencies and a whole bunch of cryptocurrencies. You can immediately convert that on the platform, and you can load it up directly into the card, into the currency that you plan to spend on. So you can actually save on the FX fees too. We've got one of the highest limits, I would believe. For a debit card, you can have a monthly spend up to 250,000 USD.
The most that I know is 25,000. So that's a pretty significant difference. Oh, so now it's basically a bank account where the other cards were more like, the other cards are like novelty prepaid cards. I've been using the Bitpay Card since 2016, but I'm excited to get your card so I could try it out and see if I'll switch over. I'm a big Bitcoin card person. I have like 6 of them. I love using them all.
Yeah, and well, you can fund it with Ethereum if you want.
Now I my half of Ethereum I could fund to. Hey, do you think if the Ethereum, like the whole DAO spectacle happened like today, it would have been treated differently than 2016 when it happened?
Why would it be different?
Well, because Ethereum is a lot bigger now. When Ethereum was around, it was still very nascent. It was only a year or two old, or maybe 3 years old, and it wasn't as big. So, basically rolling back and freezing the hackers' funds and doing, I forget exactly what they did because it's controversial. Basically, Ethereum was at a crossroads, and do they accept immutability or do they accept their version of consensus? Because the Ethereum Foundation says that the consensus said to roll back. So do you think that if that had happened now, they would have foregone that all the hacker, so like for the sake of immutability and for the sake of the integrity of our chain, we're not going to roll it back? You think that's what it would say now, or you would have the Ethereum miners of the 12 people in the room that decided to roll back would go back and say, nope, we're going to do it. We're going to save everyone's money. Because we're in a different time now. Ethereum is like 10 times the size.
Well, yes. I mean, and, if it was me, honestly, integrity is integrity. You don't compromise on integrity.
True story.
Yeah.
But that's what happened with Ethereum. I mean,
we can't make decisions. If someone made their mind to do this, then, I mean, that's what you believe in and that's what you're backing. So, hey guys,
True. What's your take on scaling in general?
Scaling is important. Everything that we build has to be built for scale. If not, why build it, right?
It's true. But you're an engineer, I'm not, like, how do you scale a blockchain the best way possible? I know it's a very loaded, like, big question, but I guess I'm trying to ask, like, going the route that we're going down with Bitcoin, I think it's the best route. You have a lot of other blockchains that are saying that we don't care the size of our actual blockchain, like how many gigabytes it is and how efficient it is to move data. Do you think that that's something that we need to care about? Like, we need to keep everything as small as possible, or what are your feelings on this?
Well, as an exchange owner, it's a real pain in the ass with all these design flaws. For us to sync up a node, it takes forever. And then the reliability of the node, and then to maintain multiple nodes just to ensure consistency, right? So if you create such a huge barrier, how do you expect easy adoption, right?
Oh, you're right.
So design does matter. But, when these things were designed, other than Bitcoin, right? A lot of these recent blockchains, they're built by people not necessarily with the appropriate experiences in building such things. I mean, anyone can build a simple program, but to have that scale to handle millions of requests a second, it's very different, right? And
so, do you have to interface constantly with, I guess, like, so with Bitcoin, you have the main chain, but now you have so many layers that we're building on top of, like Lightning, and you have side chains and you have Blockstream, but you have Lightning Labs, and you have all these different companies that are trying to scale and build on top of Bitcoin, and that's great. So when there's an issue or something's wrong, you're not like interfacing with the main chain right now. You're interfacing with the layer on top of that, and it's really good for security and scaling. Ethereum and others have gone a different route and doing all their scaling on chain. I guess I'm looking for an engineer perspective, like, for what are the pros of doing that and what are the cons of doing that?
Well, I would say, there are two angles to it, right? Some people say microservices are good, but then monolith systems are bad. But, not necessarily. It really comes down to the use case. So it really comes down to the application of it, right? And some side chains are trying to solve very specific problems. And you have a separate group of people specifically looking to solve and address a specific use case. So I think that adds to, the modularity of an entire design, which is good.
I remember, it's funny that you say modular my limited like knowledge of engineering. I remember when we were launching BitInstant, my partner Gareth told me, he said the best thing that we can do is to build this company like puzzle pieces. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, if we can separate and build the company in different parts that work together, it's easier to isolate the problems. It's better for hackers, to be able to get into separate instances and things like that. If they do get in, it's very limited. But it's also easier to scale that way when you have like, instead of just packing it all into one code base, that would be like the future. So if it's so simple and it's such a good idea, and if you look at any other industry, that's how they would scale, is to build layers and layers, then why was the scaling debate so contested?
Well, I mean, I
It
can't
became political.
No, I mean, I can't really comment on what I'm not so familiar with. But what I would say is, for me, when we built things like that, I think you mentioned a very good point there, building it up as a puzzle. And for me, when we realized that we built something wrong, I spent, let's say, a week building up something. I thought, this will be a good design. I've repeatedly done this, and I've just scraped the whole thing and rebuilt it from scratch again.
Really?
And if we were to count the number of times I've done this, I couldn't count, because every time I realized that I designed this wrongly, I knew that it was not possible to save it. We have to, go back to the drawing board. But that's also good, because when you think of it like basic puzzle pieces, you're building all these pieces independently, and then you're just trying to make it fit and make it all come together. So you put these two things together, that's how you really achieve real scale, right? And the whole point is, hey, if I came up with this design and I thought it was brilliant, what's stopping me with coming up with something even better than that, right?
That's a very good attitude to have, but you're also like constantly thinking that you could do better, but then so you're not happy, you're rebuilding everything all the time. No, I'm just joking. I exaggerate. I know. I'm just teasing. But what so how are you doing like active developing at BTSE now? How do you like interface with all your developers on a daily basis?
I still do. It's because 15 years of experience building up high performance systems comes with a lot of experience. And what we want to do is try and have our engineers be able to learn quickly and adapt from that. So it also does require, guidance. I love to code. There are very key features that I will code. Just because I like the complexity behind it.
What's your favorite thing you've ever coded?
Well, I would say BTSE's a core matching engine, right?
Really?
That's all. Yeah, that always drives me, because, here and there, there'll always be some cool features that needs to be done. And it's just a passion, I would say.
Yeah, you're if you look at it, like if I built that, I'd be always looking at the metrics, like how much money's moving through, how many trades, how many transactions, and saying to myself, like, wow, like I'm almost it's something to make proud of yourself every day. You look at that and say, I built that, and you have, tens of thousands or however many people that are using it on a daily basis. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece of infrastructure.
Well, what's the fun part is what's next, right?
What is next? You seem to be someone who is constantly restless on wanting to set the bar forward for your own standards. You seem to be like, just from talking to you seem to be like setting your standards constantly higher and higher and higher. I wish I had that drive. I kind of do, but I want to like continue to make sure I continue to have that. So now what's exciting you? What are you investing in? Because maybe it's something that I want to follow or invest in or do.
Well, I mean, you start to see the things that we do as an exchange or as BTSE as a brand, not even the exchange. You'll see the features that we offer in time to come will be more advanced than a lot of the other regular exchanges, just because they're very specific to one market, one niche. Is that bad or not? No, not necessarily. Where I have the most fun and why I started venture building is because I love to meet brilliant people, and I love to work together with them and bring that all together in synergies and partnerships. And that's where it's really fun, because you see a lot of different perspectives and you see different markets that you never knew about.
Where are you looking forward to traveling to the most when the world opens back up?
I've got a long list, actually.
Oh, business and pleasure. Give me both.
Pleasure. I love Europe.
Yeah, me too. That's what I miss the most. Just traveling and exploring the random cities and eating good food.
Yes. Asia. Asia's all usually work, food. But yeah, I do love a good drink, and anywhere I can get a good drink with friends.
Yeah, me too. My two are Europe. I was supposed to go to a wedding. I'm supposed to be at a wedding right now in Spain, so I'm missing that. Sad. And then also, I was planning on spending like 3 months this year with my wife between Tokyo, Singapore, and a bunch of other places in Asia. So it's a shame that we couldn't do that. But those are the two places that I miss the most, I think, out of everyone.
Yeah, well, hopefully everything starts to open up by the end of the year, Maybe.
Things here have mostly opened up. You see people wearing masks and things that have the biggest worry, like autoimmune deficiencies and things like that. So it's getting better slowly but surely, but it's good to be able to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to me today. I really appreciate it. Such a fun and great show. Great conversation. Learned so much, and I know the listeners will too.
Likewise.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Charlie. Cheers.